Y'all, there has been tons of drama of late surrounding the most recent spell teasers, and Wizard101 has officially responded to the feedback. I didn't expect them to respond so soon, but I think it kind of speaks to how much people were freaking out. But what are the spell teasers that I'm talking about? Last week, we learned that Wiz is changing multiple spells, including widely used spells like Empower, Dark Pact, and Dark Surge. And why were people freaking out? Why was there drama? Because Dark Surge is about to become a self-damage hit in order to give you pips for a shadow pip. And Dark Pact and Empower, instead of doing moon damage to give you blades and pips, it's going to be doing a % of your health to give you blades and pips. Now, a lot of people were saying they would never use the new versions of the spells, and I think Wiz listened to that because the feedback was kind of strong, so I thought I'd cover what they did in response to the feedback. Starting right off, this is what they teased just yesterday after the feedback, the new version of Empower. Now, some things are very, very important to note even with this change, right? It is still keeping what they decided to do, where you take a % of your health in order to get the pips that Empower normally gives. But the original version of the spell that we got teased was 1 pip. This is now totally free. What this card is saying now, even if you have literally no pips, you could use this spell, take 5% of your maximum health, no matter how much HP you have, and get 3 pips. Now, let's talk about PvE first, because I would actually argue that Empowers are more used in PvE. For a lot of people, the self-damage that you take in terms of the moon damage from the current version of Empower is very nice because you get rid of weaknesses with it. This new mechanic where you take a % of your HP, it's not something that can clear weaknesses. It's not something that uses your pierce, your damage, your shields, your weaknesses, anything that either increases or decreases damage. It doesn't basically account for that. It's just 5% of your maximum HP. So for example, on my death, I would always take 600 damage from this new spell, and basically you get 3 pips in return. Now, I'll say this, compared to the version that we got before that was 1 pip and stole 5% of your HP, this is clearly a buff. However, will this be used without the weakness clearing? I'm still not 100% convinced on that. That being said, because Dark Surge is one of those things that's very, very used for pip gain, and that's also going to become self-damage, as we will talk about in this video, it looks like this new spell might be one of the better ways to actually get pips, especially if you're not actually gonna die on the spot by doing this, right? If that's 600 health or 500 health if you have less HP, right? If that's not like a deal breaker, this might actually be a better way to get pips, especially when you don't even have a shadow pip. It's definitely more usable in PvP, I would argue, because it doesn't clear weaknesses. This is still something that people will have to account for in PvE. I mentioned this in the last video covering this, but Purge is still probably the #1 bet. I was actually wrong in that video. I thought you needed a ton of training points to learn this, but it actually is only 1 training point. So this is just definitely worth just training if you do PvE, so that you don't have to worry about weaknesses. The only way this will screw you compared to regular Empower is if there's more than 3 weaknesses, or if you have really powerful debuffs covered by 3 weaknesses, like a 3-fold fever. I feel like that's very rare in PvE, if it even happens at all. So this should get the job done. I guess on the bright side, if you do want an easy way to get pips to do things like Tempest or other X-pip spells, this new Empower might be the one to do it if you're willing to take 5% of your health. Now, just like that, this is a new Dark Pact. Also, 0 pips. You take 5% of your health, and then you get some very, very good blades in return. So the new Dark Pact, it's being called Dark Tribute because they're adding pacts with shadow magic in the upcoming Darkmoor update, but I guess Dark Tribute, right? This is actually a double buff compared to what we have right now as the base spell. So the base spell, it does moon damage, it's 1 pip, and it gives you 25 blades. The new version of this is 0 pips, gives you 35 blades, but still doesn't clear weaknesses, does 5% of your max health. This is still a pretty hefty thing to be paying. Now, here's the deal. I think the big way the Dark Pact is actually going to be affecting the meta of the game is the fact that there are certain pets that give multiple Dark Pacts that are no longer that viable. And I'm going to be honest, just like in PvE, the weakness clearing part of Empower is very, very important. I would argue the same for the current version of Dark Pact. That moon damage that can clear weaknesses is very, very important. You should do it when you're weakness, so you're threatening offense when you would have otherwise had defense. While yes, the of blades are really, really good. And yes, I could actually see myself using this spell. I would not go out of my way to make a pet that gives me 3 item cards when I could get other item cards from this. I would rather have this in the version of a treasure card, or maybe I'll just pack this occasionally on the depth just to get a little bit more of a buff. This little 0 pip thing though is very, very good. I feel like this is just another really, really good buff. You could actually use this much, much better in PvE just as a natural buff, even on a depth. There is a silver lining for people that are annoyed about the weakness clearing being gone. If you're a depth, you finally have self-damage death spells that are just as good for you as they are for everybody else, especially in PvE. Right, doing a 35 buff for 5% of your health at 0 pips, that's a very, very big increase. I think death as a support with this spell, it's gonna be very, very better, right? It's gonna be a lot better. It almost makes me wonder if you're like a storm or a fire and you're hitting, would you rather have a balance actually be the support that could do universal buffs like blades and hexes? Or would you rather have a death that can faint naturally, that could curse, which is as good as a hex, and now they could do a much, much better blade on paper than a balance ever could? Right, I think that is something that'll come out of this. Now that this is 0 pips and 35 blades, I'm assuming you can sharpen this. These are basically 45 blades that you could do as a support. Compared to the empower change, I'd say this is the one that I would really call a buff, especially in PvE. I'm glad that they made the 0 pips. If you're gonna take 5% of your damage, at least let it be more usable. I think this will screw over people a little bit less. And finally, the last change that they did in response to the feedback that people were giving is the new Dark Surge. So what you see is a new Dark Surge. So the original teaser actually had it give 10% backlash, but now it's only 5%, but nothing else has changed. It still gives you a school pip for your school and another school pip for the school you're weaving into. For example, if I were a death that's weaving into fire like my death using this, I would basically take 5% of my maximum health, which is around 600 HP. And then I would get a death school pip and then a fire school pip, something that I would never complain about, very, very honestly. Compared to the free version of Dark Surge that we have right now, it is like some trade-off, right? But I think that's what they're doing. They're introducing a trade-off for using shadow magic. But I think the original teaser, when it said take 10% of your maximum HP, people were like, why would I ever use this, right? Like an ice with 14,000 HP, they would be taking 1,400 damage just to get pips. Right, that would have been a little crazy. Now it's only 5%. I still think Dark Surge as like a 5 copies in deck type of thing, it's probably not going to be as relevant. And keep in mind also, they're introducing a lot of variations to the current shadow spells that we have in a way where you can take 0 lash and also get a pip in return. This is based on very early teasers, but there are now multiple ways, sometimes even without taking lash, to get pips with these spells, not just Dark Surge. This is clearly a very PvP forward spell. I do think it's going to be much more used at 5% lash than 10%. However, still used a lot less than now. It might slow down the meta a lot more than now. It might make shad rating, which is a barrier of entry for PvP, still less important, although not as less important as it would have been with the original form of the teaser. So do I think that Wiz's response to all of the feedback, do I think it's good? At the end of the day, I still think they should make no PvP versions of Dark Pact and Empower that do self-damage for the PvE players. I think there's no point messing with something that isn't really functionally broken. It's just convenient to have. It's a nice thing that a lot of people sometimes invest a lot of pet snacks in, especially when you look at things like the Dark Pact pet, especially when you look at how expensive Empower TCs are. Right, you have people putting in resources to be able to deal with weaknesses with self-damage hits, and now they can't, especially in PvE. I think there should be ways to get no PvP versions of these if, for some reason, the moon damage versions of Dark Pact and Empower are too good for PvP. And the other thing I would love to see with Dark Pact and Empower, I'd love if it wasn't based off of your max health, but based on your current health. I don't mind shadow magic being based off of max health because that's kind of what we're used to now with Shrike and I guess with shadow packs and all the other backlash things that we're incoming with. But at the end of the day, I think shad magic, the whole gimmick is that it comes at a price. I don't really see that same thing being like a death identity thing. So it'd be nice if it was a little bit less punishing. Maybe they could, like, you know, put levels to it. And at that point, I think you could make other spells that do more than 5% of your health, because at the end of the day, right, if it's current HP, it could never kill you, right? If you have 600 health and you use the new versions of Dark Pact and Empower, you're dead. But if it's current health, 10% would be 60 HP, right? That's not something people are going to complain about as much. You could honestly, instead of making it 5%, make it higher if it was based on current health instead of max health. I think that would be a better way to go about it, especially considering we're losing that weakness clearing ability now. That is something I'd like to see them experiment with, because that's how old Backlash used to work, and I don't think that was actually a bad concept at all. But yes, I did want to cover these. Hopefully y'all like the new versions of spells, but if you don't, let me know in the comments, because I'm still a little undecided. Am I going to use all of these spells or not? Obviously, test realm hasn't even started. The fact that they're listening to feedback this early, I can tell it's going to be a big test realm. So y'all give as much feedback as you can while these spells are still subject to change. I look forward to reading all of y'all's thoughts on this. Drop a like if you enjoyed, and leave a sub if you're new. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.